you. Good morning. For those brave souls who came to the front row. I admire your scholar's faith. That's awesome. So we're going to be talking about HR metrics and predictive analytics and how one leads together, what the difference is, etc. The first question I always get when you see the company name, let's just blank. Oh, there you go. Is how do you pronounce that thing anyway? You know what I mean? So, this on too. Is that better? Okay, good. Now I can walk. See, that's nice. Our company is called CUTE, C-U-T-E. Why? Because, well, it represents the company's values. Our company offers tools, online assessments, etc. that are short, attractive, and clever. Something is smart, attractive, and small. It's cute. Why does it have a hyphen in it? Well, the cheeky answer is because we're a testing company, and so we had to be funny and create a name that is itself a test. The hyphen is a distractor. Can you pronounce the name? But the real answer is that we are an innovative company that's constantly trying to push the edge, and so we try to be on the cutting edge, cut-e, which is great because no one knows how to pronounce our name now. That's what you get when you get a bunch of Europeans in a room and you have to figure out how to make a name. So, my name is Haas, and the PhD is in an area of specialty called industrial and organizational psychology. So how many of you think I'm analyzing right now? That is why I'm interested in metrics, because although I don't admit it, deep down inside, I've embraced my inner nerd. Yes, stats is fun. I think so. Don't worry, you're not going to have to do any statistics in this class. In fact, how many of you have taken a stats class at some point in your life? How many of you remember what a stats metric is? A mean, standard deviation, a median, a mode, a normal bell curve. Great, we're not going to talk about any of that stuff. Well, maybe I'll mention it since I can't help it, but just so you know. So, my organization has 30 offices across the world. We're a global test house, meaning an assessment provider, pre-employment testing and leadership assessments, and entry level all the way up. We also do custom consulting kind of work and executive assessments and that sort of thing. Our tools are translated in 40+ languages. So if you have a multinational company that needs tools in lots of different languages, there's a very few of us who can do it. We're one of the few. Examples from clients. For some reason, we're supposed to always show examples of clients, so just so I've now met the criteria for some clients. Big data. What is big data? How many think that big data is super important now in HR? Okay, a few of you raise your hand. I was having a conversation yesterday with someone who is sort of in charge of HRIS, and she's convinced that big data is the HRIS system. I said, no, big data is much bigger than your HRIS system. But you're right, there's a lot of data in there. That is true. But how many of you have a loyalty program card from any supermarket, gas station, retail shop? Guess what? They're tracking everything you buy. Why would they do that? For coupons. Yes, they do give you coupons to encourage you to come back. It's true. And they give you loyalty points and that kind of stuff. But you know what they do? They don't care about your data. They care about all of your data. And when they have thousands and thousands of people's data, they know what products get sold fastest, what other products they tend to buy, and they can anticipate what things should be next to each other on the shelves. If you're going to buy a bottle of wine, maybe you want to buy a bottle, or maybe you're going to buy some crackers to go with the wine and cheese, or etc. So they can kind of figure that kind of stuff out. There is an article I read, I don't know if it's true, but it was an interesting comment. They said that Walmart does such a good job of tracking this stuff, and Target, that they literally can predict before you may know whether you're pregnant or not, based on what you're buying. I don't know if that's true. Obviously you're a guy, it's not going to apply to you. But you get the idea, it's a little bit big brother-ish, right? And, right, disturbing. Yeah. But possible. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, actually. But first off, what is big data anyway? Massive amounts of data, information, structured or unstructured. And what I mean by that, structured data is this, some sort of data set. You might get an export from some sort of HRIS or some sort of tracking sheet you create. Unstructured data is like all the stuff in your inbox. You can learn a lot about a person just by the emails. I have coworkers who send me emails, and the subject line is from a different conversation. And the response is clearly from their phone because there's typos in it, it's one sentence, and there's lots of abbreviations. Then there are other people who the whole message is just the subject line, and the message body is just their signature file. And then there are people like me who write 3 pages of email stuff, and then realize that this person's never going to read all this junk, so I delete everything except 5 sentences. And I spend way too much time writing the email. You know what I mean? But that tells you something about the person. Imagine analyzing all the emails from people. You think you might be able to predict something about them? Oh yeah, you can. You can get a good sense of that. What about social networks? Just analyze all the people they're emailing and how often and what topics they're writing about. You can get a good sense of that stuff too. So where does data come from? Well, it comes from everything. First off, Outlook, obviously, and from social media. Let's see, your networking, professional and private, personal. Sharing with, how many of you guys take pictures on Instagram or post stuff on Twitter or Facebook, etc.? Anyone ever do that? I did it yesterday. I was in the Omni in Houston hotel in Houston, and they had a koi pond in the hotel. I was like, wow. I haven't seen those in like 20 years. This is great. So I took a picture of myself saying, I don't know why I'm in Houston while looking at a koi pond, but here I am. This is awesome. Closed circuit TV, credit card transactions. How many of you guys pay almost everything with credit card these days? Because you want to get loyalty points, because you want to, it's easier? Yeah. That is a huge data set. Think about it. 10 years of what you purchased. We know your whole life. You write probably a small bibliography about you, just by what you're doing. Oh, when they travel, they don't travel, they do this, they do. These are the types of stores they visit. Localization, remember, how many of you guys have a mobile phone? How many of you guys are awake? Anyone awake? All right, so if you have a mobile phone, odds are your GPS is on. Odds are that you're being tracked. Or you could be tracked. Yes? No? Okay? Some of you actively promote where you are. When you Facebook state, I am here, kind of thing. Okay? Playing online, buying things we talked about. So imagine networking, okay? I listened to a professor from Stanford University 2 weeks ago presenting on a research study he did with social media, specifically Facebook. What they did was they had an online study where they invited people to participate in taking a whole bunch of intelligence tests and personality assessments and behavioral assessments and other things, and then also asked for access to collect their likes on Facebook. Then they ran an analysis. What they were able to find is that people that liked certain pictures or updates or phrases or messages, just based on that, you could predict really interesting things. What might be interesting if you could predict from that? Yes. Come on. There's no wrong answer here. Or where they live. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, right? If they're liking lots of stuff in their hometown, clearly. What else? Political views. Yes, in fact. Conservative versus liberal was one of the ones they would predict. What about extroversion? Openness to experience. Agreeableness. Conscientiousness. Does that sound familiar? It's called the Big Five. 5-factor model of personality. They could also predict whether someone is straight or gay. They can predict their racial ethnicity, their gender, their religiosity, and their religion. All sorts of interesting stuff. So if you think that your information is private, etc., 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 but you're liking lots of things, even though you don't disclose necessarily, well, guess what? If you read between the lines, you can do this. Is this such a scary thing? Well, no, honestly, think about it. If your friends, it is because it's Big Brother. But on the other hand, if someone reads your profile, you don't think they're going to figure most of that out anyway. I'm liking stuff all the time. I have lots of friends who are religious. It takes a long time to figure out that I might be religious. Yeah, maybe. No, not really. It's pretty quick. So, just to give you a sense of things. So, did everyone ever hear of the hypercycle? Everyone ever hear of hype? Something's got a lot of hype? Yeah. So, what was really big, like a year or two ago, was big data. Everyone's still talking about it, but it's sort of already over, right? The excitement's not as hype as it used to be. In 2013 is when everyone was talking about big data. This could be the biggest thing, and all sorts of, industries, not just HR, everywhere. Then we're going through this process of disillusionment. Oh, yeah, there's lots of data, but what do we do with it? Oh, come on. You didn't realize that was coming? How many of you guys have an HRIS or applicant tracking system in your organization? How good's the data? Yeah. Hello? And then eventually they go, oh, there's some useful stuff in here. Slope of enlightenment. Okay? And so then they start to actually use the data and it starts to become more valuable. So what are HR metrics? Anybody use HR metrics? You take attendance? Turnover? I should say staff churn. In Europe, turnover means revenue. You know that? Yeah. Confuses the heck out of you every time I talk about colleagues. So, right, the turnover of staff, yes, absolutely. What about, like ROI or other things? Yes?
Time to fill.
Time to fill. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's a very common one as well. Sorry? Engagement? Yeah, sure. Engagement. That's a very big one right now. It's actually very hot. So characteristics of good metrics. Well, duh. If it's not accurate, it's not useful. Can you imagine a baseball player card? Are you ever a sports fan here? Yeah, I'm not going to be honest. I'm not really a big sports fan, okay? But I used to collect baseball cards when I was young. And what I found out was, in the back, there were statistics. Batting averages, house, etc. Imagine if I, as an HR recruiter, not an HR recruiter, but say I was a recruiter, had on the back of my business card my metrics. Time to fill, quality of hire, happiness or satisfaction of client, internal customer. Whoa, that would be pretty interesting, right? Would we want that? I don't know. It'd be good in some ways. It's scary in others, right? Linked to the strategic and operational objectives. How many organizations are actually actively doing that? They're looking at the corporate objectives, and then having an HR strategy and objective, and then somehow what you do is linked to them. Management by objective kind of mentality. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, maybe. Okay, excellent. There's a room of like 50 of you here. Okay. Clear calculations. Why clear calculations? I don't mean that they calculate correctly. I mean that you can explain it to someone. If you start doing really fancy mathematical stuff and they look at you cross-eyed, then you're going to lose them. It has to meet a need, and it has to be able to be used comparatively for some purpose. If I can't say if this is good or not, what's the use? Time to fill. It was 180 days. Is that good? I don't know. It depends. If you're hiring a receptionist, that's horrible. If you're hiring a CEO, that may be fantastic. So how many of you do use metrics for tracking objectives again? About a third to half. Okay, good. What sort of metrics are you using? Time to fill? Engagement? A whole lot. Oh yeah, dashboard of KPIs, EO, succession planning, metrics. All right, you're going to come here. You want to take the mic? Just kidding. Thank you. There was a SHRM survey of 357 randomly selected, whatever that means, human resources professionals, and they asked, does your organization use HR metrics? Do they track it? 39% said yes, 53% said no, and some said, I don't know. You don't know? You're in HR. How do you know if you're doing this or not? Anyway, why do people not do it? Why do HR departments say, well, come on, you can't measure what we do. Really? But people say that. It's their mentality. Lack of clear purpose for what they should be measuring. Lack of cooperation between departments. It's hard to get the data. Any of your organizations, the HRIS system is controlled by IT. Probably, if you have an SAP or one of these sort of systems where it does lots of things like financial kind of stuff, and it is an add-on, it's for talent, then you might find that to be the case. Sometimes it's hard to extract multiple data systems. I used to work at Burger King for a global corporation. I can say this now because I don't work there anymore. I was a senior manager of talent development, and we had data from our recruiting system. We had data from the SAP, PeopleSoft, etc. type system. And we had data from the recruiters. And you couldn't even look across the three systems and make sure people have the same job title. I was talking to a big multinational company that sells sodas. I'm not going to say any more than that. And one of my compatriot friends told me, you have to understand, we're a huge multinational. The only thing we have consistent across the system in HR talent methodologies is we call it the insane output tracking system. And yet, we still can't tell you on any given day how many employees we have. Really? You don't know how many people work for you? Don't you pay them? So this is more challenging than it seems. So if you feel a bit overwhelmed sometimes, don't, because there's a good reason for it. If you can't measure what you're doing, then how do you know if it's working? If you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. So it's like pretending it's not there. That doesn't work. You have to measure it in order to improve. If you don't improve, anyone believe in self-development? Anyone believe in self-awareness? Yeah. So imagine you give feedback to a senior manager, or director, executive, etc., and they don't listen. Or they don't want to listen. Or they have no interest. Do you think that might hinder their career growth, or their professional development? Of course. Well, did you think our unit, our division, might benefit from feedback into how we're doing? So what are you going to do? You're going to ask your client, how are you doing? Well, you could. That's one metric. It's called client satisfaction, customer satisfaction surveys. But that in itself is the whole picture. It helps you prove the value of your resources. You know, I was just at a client yesterday in Houston, and they were telling me that one of the big, is in this big, countrywide meeting of a multinational, strategies, etc. And they said the problem they're having, they went through mergers and acquisitions, they acquired 3 different companies in like a year. It's scary. It's fun. Imagine that. Talk about different systems, different processes, different people. Yeah, but they're getting it under control, thank goodness. But one of their concerns is about proving the value of HR. Now, one thing that's really good is when you go through mergers and acquisitions, suddenly talent really is clearly going to matter, because it quickly becomes a big problem if it doesn't. So then they discover it matters. But then how do you prove the value? Well, if you can't prove what you're doing, then it gets more difficult. Helping to show return on investment, providing some standards, showing what contributes to business results, all these things are very good. I've asked this question 5 times, but the SHRM survey asked them, what metrics are you tracking? Healthcare cost per employee. Anyone here in benefits? Okay, I'm sure you're tracking things, right? Cost of benefits. Turnover rate. One of you said that. Absenteeism. How often they're showing up to work, showing up late, etc. Retention rate. What's that? That's sort of like turnover, except it's like, can we keep them? Do you want to keep the employees around? Think that might be a good idea? Hopefully you keep the good ones, right? Is that the whole point? Cost per hire. Promotions. Time to fill. Someone else said that one. Turnover cost. Training, return on investment. How many people are in training and development here? Learning. Anything like that? Yeah. This is not so easy to track, is it? Wouldn't it be great to prove it? Want to get more budget? Prove as a return. What are other things that people say? Annual incentive plans, percentage of salaries, satisfaction, workers' comp, reportable accidents. Anyone in manufacturing or transportation or any industries where safety is a real critical factor? Diversity, you mentioned that, thank you. What about service level agreements in response to employee relations and benefit requests? Do we ever have to do that? Come to agreement, prove what we're doing, showing that we have good response rates. One of the ones I thought was really good is, it's here somewhere, quality referred candidates. What about quality of placements? Someone said time to fill earlier, right? These are all related to the recruitment side of things. And there's some others on the other side. Reason for voluntary termination. Well, okay, it's nice to track that, but I wonder how accurate it is. Let's be honest. What metrics should you be tracking? What do you think? If you had to figure out, I talked to this huge North American HR department yesterday. We're doing a team building for them. I already told you I want some Houston, so I'm not going to say more than that. But they were in the energy sector. You get kind of a general idea. All these different divisions, benefits group, the HR kind of consultant group, which is advising, which was sort of all broad HR stuff, the employee relations that was, had very specific functions. And one of the tasks I had along the way to help them get aligned to their organizational goals and strategy goals was to quickly define the critical success factors for themselves personally and their units. And they're like, well, what is that? What are the 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you absolutely must do to successfully have done your job at the end of the year? So that at the end of the year, they're going to come and say, you did a great job in your purpose as a recruiting function, as a HR advisory function, as an employee relations function. And you know what? They looked at me with blank stares. Blank stares. I don't know. Okay. Pretend you met a first-line supervisor on a rig. And they said, what do you do in HR advisory anyway? What is that? Aren't you all HR people the same? You ever get that look? So when you're answering that question in an elevator that only takes 30 seconds to go up, what do you say? Those are the key things. So if you know what those are, maybe you should be tracking metrics that relate to them. Hello. Right? How do you know if you're doing a good job? So time to fill or time to hire. Very common metric. Is this a good metric? It's clearly a popular one. We saw that in the survey, yeah? So we're tracking it. Why? Why are we tracking it? Because someone said we should tell them that we do it fast? Well, why would you track time to fill? Please, yeah, anyone?
Well, you track it to benchmark against the average for those types of positions to evaluate the recruiter on whether or not they're working their requisitions.
To evaluate the effectiveness of the recruiter, are they working their recs? Right. Okay, that's a very good point. Yes?
Open positions cost an organization money, especially our small organizations.
So, like
It's
time
key
lost.
positions specifically, they're difficult for them to operate.
So what you're basically saying is, because there's someone not doing that work, we are losing money. And therefore it costs something. So if we get someone to see to do the work, then we'll be more productive. It'll generate more revenue or more whatever we produce, widgets, help people for not-for-profit, etc. Right? That's basically what you're saying? Fantastic. Yeah, you're right. And that's actually an ROI indicator, isn't it? If you look at it from that perspective. I don't think most companies think of it that way. But I think you're right. That would be a good way of looking at it. So the whole idea is, how long does it take to fill a vacant position until they get hired? So let's say a company, one of my clients, does a large-scale graduate recruiting, college campus recruiting. Anyone else do college campus recruiting in their company? Couple, yeah, okay. So it's really neat. If you haven't gone through this experience, I recommend it for every HR person. You get to spend really long days on a college campus for like a short stint of time, go from campus to campus, usually within a span of a couple of months, and have to interview and meet lots of applicants. You get this big book of resumes, and then you pick the ones you want to interview, and then you do something with them, right? You interview them, and then you make offers. And you try to beat all the other ones, hire employers who are all there, who are your competitors, and getting them in. And so do you think time to hire would be, or time to fill would be a good metric? Maybe. I think time to interview might be, if I can get them to come to me first, right? But guess what? Then my client, who's like one of the top consulting firms, think Ernst & Young, PwC, et cetera, actually it takes forever for the people they hired to actually start. Because they're still in university, they haven't graduated yet. So their time to hire, time to fill metrics really terrible in that area. But they're hiring the best people because they're hiring them before they're out of school. And they're really good at competing in that regard, you know what I mean? That's their goal. The problem with time to fill is it's an efficiency-focused metric most of the time. If I hire everyone on my list of requisites really quickly, get them out, I get them offers, etc., and I get it moving. Is that good or bad? It could be good, but it depends. What's the quality of the hire? I am not moving this thing, but it's moving. Solution. What about prioritizing our behaviors? I heard a story that was really excellent from one of these other colleagues of mine in the strategic talent space. And what she was talking about was, she was a new recruiter in a company. She had experience in other organizations, now is here. And now, because you're the new company, or a new recruiter coming in from somewhere else who has lots of experience, by default, if you come from a long distance with a suitcase, you're an expert. Have you heard that thinking? Yeah, you got experience, you've been somewhere else, tell us what you know. And so she got to walk around and model and follow some of the best recruiters in space. What she found is that because time and fill was such a critical metric for them, that he would go through his list and sort what was the longest open rep and then fill it. So today, I'm going to focus on hiring an administrative assistant. Okay, what about this one down here? That is hiring an engineer who has, top-level security clearances and has passed the lie detector and background checks, et cetera. Oh yeah, that is a really good one to work on, but see, I've got like 2 more months before I have to fill that one. So I'm not going to focus on that. What? No, that doesn't make any sense. But that was the behavior that was being rewarded because at the end of the day, his bonus was based on time to fill, not on quality of hire or criticality of hire. And that's why prioritizing around behaviors is an impact of hire component. That's my point there. There's different levels of metrics. Efficiency, time to fill is a great example. Effectiveness, date needed. That same person told the story I thought was great. She said we put a field in the applicant tracking system that was date needed. Suddenly it wasn't time to hire. It was when we actually need to hire them by. Meaning if you don't hire them by then, we're losing money. Because the other person is retiring or going on leave or the project is going to start. If the person isn't sitting in a chair knowing what they need to do, by that date, we're going to have a problem. We're going to lose money. Thank you for that comment before. Right? Because the time to hire might not be important. But if you hire them 2 months after the date needed, that's a big problem. If you hire them 6 months ahead of that time, maybe you could have been hiring someone else instead. That's an interesting idea, isn't it? Impact. What's the gain or loss in revenue if the position isn't filled by that date? So imagine having in a field like that, where you actually make the hiring manager make an argument for why this person needs to be hired. We're in HR. Any of you guys have like a zero-based budget model where you have to prove anything you want to spend money on in order to get the money? Imagine you turn that around on the hiring manager. You say they need to hire more people and say, prove to me that you need to hire someone. When you need them hired by, to do what, and what's the ROI if you hire them versus the cost if we don't? What's the impact to your business? Prove to me that we should be doing this. Can you imagine? And then say, don't prove it to me, prove it to your superiors who are going to give the budget, whoa, that's a very good way of thinking. But wouldn't it create impact? And then you can turn around and say, look, because we got them in the job at the right time, the impact it had, now we've got good ROI, and so did they. It's turning things on its head a bit, but isn't it a neat idea? So here's a common approach. You select important HR processes, you monitor it with metrics, and then you show your performance. Anyone do that? Yeah, probably. A lot of companies do exactly this. Is that the recommended approach? It's definitely the common approach. Here's what we do. Look how great we are. We did it better than last year. Okay, are we doing the right things? I don't know. You tell us we are. The only way to prove that what you're doing adds value is you have to become a strategic partner. Come on, you've been reading articles about it in this magazine, forever. Get a seat at the table. Become a strategic partner. Tell me you have been reading magazines for decades and seeing the same articles coming out in thousands of different ways. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the HR magazine. It's great. But it's a common theme because we don't have the seat at the table usually. You want to get a seat at the table? Figure out what the organization's goals and strategies and objectives are. By the way, usually you can read some of that on the website. And I'm pretty sure if you're in HR, you can request that from your superiors. I'd like to know what we're trying to do this year so I can know if I can do anything to help. What a good idea. And then create some goals around it. If you really want to have an impact, don't hire people faster. Figure out what they're trying to accomplish and figure out how can we help you move the needle in your goals. The same client I was talking about before said, we had the country manager told them, the HR team for North America, we have unfortunately, abysmal safety record, considering how good we consider ourselves in general. It's gotten worse over the last 2-3 years, and it's embarrassing. We need to fix it right away. The people in the room, when we're talking about all the goals for the year, they're like, I don't know if this is our thing. That's an operation thing. I was like, oh wait, do computers cause accidents? Computers fall off shelves, and then that's the safety measures you're trying. No, people fall down and get hurt, etc. Do you think it might have something to do with people? Like, yeah, you're right, we should be doing something around this, you know. And they do stuff. They track the metrics for them, for the operations. But couldn't you be proactively educating, even hiring people based on safety-related sort of things? There's so much they could be doing. So think about it differently. What are the organization's goals that they're telling you are really critical? And then figure out what you, as an HR consultant, can do to help them move that needle. Because they do not look at it from a people perspective. They look at it from an operations perspective, from a sales and marketing perspective, from a finance perspective. And what's obvious to you is not transparent to them at all. It's not clear. Right? Is this like not true? Right? It's critically true. Yeah. And all you have to do is sit in on a couple of their conversations and listen to what their strategy meetings are, and you realize, I could help with that. No one's asking me because no one knows I do that. You want to show value? Show them how you can make a difference there. So use predictive analytics to help them achieve their strategic objectives. So where did that magazine go? Here it is. This is not meant to be pedantic, but in this particular magazine, that Year Ahead, HR, 9 predictions for how HR will redefine the workplace in 2015. One of the predictions, leaders will invest in talent analytics and workforce planning. When you put a program together to collect people data all in one place, you can immediately focus on urgent business issues. I would say, how about critical business issues? But both would be good. People analytic teams are being assembled to identify the best criteria for hiring and the factors that affect and drive retention and high performance. Do you think those things might be metrics or things that you should be trying to move? Of course. Here it is. Looking around, where did that pointer go? Well, first off, you have to think strategically. In order to do that, you need to understand the business. It's amazing. This group I was talking to were saying it's really important to have a strong relationship with our internal clients, or in the other divisions, and we establish trust with them. And I was like, you're absolutely correct. Do you think it might be helpful to understand what they do? What's their business goals? What are the pain points? How do you figure that out? Ask if you can sit in on a couple of their meetings. So I don't have to say anything. I'm not going to evaluate you. I'm not going to judge you guys. I'm not going to hold anything against you guys if you say something that you shouldn't be doing from an HR perspective. I just want to understand what you're trying to do and how I might be able to help. If you don't know what the business is focusing on, and how in the world do you know if you can help them? And then figure out what their key business goals are, and then figure out what you need to be measuring, and what you need to be doing, and then go do it. I know that sounds really simple, like a t-shirt, just do it, you know? But if you get there, you have a big impact. And then you can get ahead of the curve. You can be future-oriented. You can start to anticipate the problem before they see it. Does that make sense? Okay. We'll talk about big data. Now let's talk about analytics for a second. Want to see a really cool example of analytics that's a little bit Big Brother and kind of scary, but really neat? Okay. There's a company, more than one out there, that they have a relationship with many different social media companies where, we fill out that long form, it's the terms and conditions for social media. Am I over? Okay. What do you call it? Terms of media for social media, it's like 5 pages of legalese. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. How many of you guys read everything? Terms and conditions? I have a coworker who insists that I read every terms and conditions page. I said, you can read it for me, but I have never read it. No, that's just not me, sorry. So one of the things you agree to is that your data can be sold. So this is one of the companies that buys it. What they do is, if you hire the company, they will give you data on all of your employees' social media activity. Not details about what they're posting, but rather analyzing trends. So if you're trying to figure out engagement, one way to measure engagement is surveys. How engaged are you? Oh, this division is more engaged, this division is less engaged. But what about behaviors? High potentials. So you don't do it for a whole company, just doing it for the group that you think of your succession planning, pipeline, your high potentials, your emerging leaders, whatever that group is you think is really critical for the future, maybe all of the above. And you start tracking their social media activity from the perspective of, is the behavior of social media changing If they start doing a lot more activity in certain ways, it might be they're looking for a job. Would you like to know in advance if your high potentials are thinking about leaving? Because it might be a good opportunity to say, hey, we have some great projects for you to work on, we have some bonuses, we're going to give you some status, we're going to something to keep them engaged and keep them in. Because guess what? If they're thinking of leaving, and you just put them through a huge leadership program, it's got lots of money on them, and you think they're going to be, top 2, top 3 level organization leader one day, and they're talking to your competitors or someone else, what do you want to know in advance? Now, you won't know who they're talking to right now, but you'll notice whether they're really actively or passively possibly looking. Would that be useful information? Is it Big Brother? Is it too Big Brother? Not necessarily. I mean, you're not judging them. The intention is good. I want to retain them. How can I do something to retain them? It's not so you can figure out who to fire. In fact, if they're actively looking and you don't like them, you might just let them continue actively looking and do nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. Run forward. Here you go. So what do? Identify the company's pain points in its business and strategy objectives, and then figure out where you, HR, can drive value. Create a strategy for HR that focuses on how we align to do goals that will help the company drive their own strategy and their KPIs, key business objectives. Thank you very much, Christine, for saying that earlier. Identify those HR metrics that are going to impact these things. Improving the alignment of people to strategy, predicting future performance around those key objectives, impacting achieving corporate objectives. When you can do those sort of things, that is predicting performance. And how do you do it? Well, stats. You figure out what they're trying to do. And you figure out what behaviors would have to happen and what sort of processes would have to be in place to make sure that we can make that happen. And then start doing some analysis to see if it works. So this is a really big deal. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but the whole idea is review the global strategies and objectives and figure out what metrics may be useful. You meet with the various parties, like IT and finance. Why would you talk to IT and finance? By the way, if you don't take care of HR metrics, guess who will? Yeah, they've got all the capability. They've got business intelligence folks and finance. That's all they do. They do modeling. They've got IT folks, people who work with have control of the data. They already own the databases. Even though it's your data, they control it. You don't believe me? They cannot block you out in an instant. All that has to happen is one person from HR emails the department saying this person no longer is allowed to have access, and bam, you're out. Who turned it off, the switch off? IT. Right? Yeah, so they manage the data, they have access usually. So you have to get them involved, discuss what's in it for them. In fact, you probably want to establish a cross-functional team. And then have some sort of agreements worked out. And then you want to do some sort of reviews around the talent. You can figure out what you're trying to goal, or what the goal is, get the team involved, etc. And then you start getting into actually piloting and trying and testing. And guess what? It's not going to work when you first do it. Surprise, nothing works when you first do it. That's okay. The whole idea is to try to move things forward and keep things going. But the benefit can be very valuable if you do. I'm going the wrong way. There you go. All right, so how many of you guys have salespeople in your organization? Does anyone have salespeople? Good. How many of you guys make something in your organization? You produce a widget, a service, you provide something to the external public, the company, etc. Okay. How do you get the other people, the client, to buy it? Marketing, sales, something, right? Somehow that happens, right? So this is a particular case study from a client. They're actually a financial sort of technology company. Basically, it's credit card processing, payment, electronic payment processing, etc. They had a big challenge with voluntary separation rate, i.e. staff churn. People kept quitting. Anyone have a job or a particular role in your organization where you just can't keep people in the organization? Yeah, right? Turnover is usually a problem. It's not problems with people you don't want. If the people you don't like leave, that's a big problem. Because then you don't have to fire them, they don't legal stuff, they just chose to leave. But when the people you're hiring in are leaving at a very high rate, this company had over 100% turnover. They couldn't keep people a whole year. They couldn't even keep people 90 days. It was a big problem. The door going out of the building was like a huge barn door. The door coming in was a small little one-person door. And so people were walking straight through the building and walking straight out. It was a scary scenario. So WorldPay makes credit card payment processing. They are one of the biggest processors. They're number 2 globally. They have all sorts of sizes of clients, etc. This particular group that I was working with was a small business group, and so they had lots of field salespeople who were working from home and out in the field all the time, going out and visiting restaurants and retail shops, etc., and getting them credit card processing. Anyone ever shop? You ever go to a doctor? You pay by credit card? We had this conversation before, right? Look at the next time you're going there. Look at the terminal. They swipe the card. Look at the logo on it. It's probably First Data or WorldPay, or there's only a handful that are real big players. Oops, going too fast. They're trying to grow their $1 billion business. They're privately held. And they were up for sale as an IPO or sale. That was the direction they were heading at the time. They've changed directions now. They decided to grow instead and acquire other companies and change the process. But the turnover was over 100%. They were literally losing people faster than they could hire them. So what did they do? Their process they had was the most successful people were highly experienced salespeople. So they kept trying to hire more highly experienced salespeople because, I've heard this thousands of times before from recruiters. We don't want to know if you can do the job if we train you, because that's always a risk. If we know you've done it, then we know you can do it again, right? Past performance is a predictor of future results. Don't believe the stock market. Yes. If you've done it before, you can probably do it again. Okay. Will you? That's a different question. The problem they were having was everyone they were bringing in wasn't staying. So they decided, okay, we need to change the whole model. We're going to hire early career, maybe inexperienced salespeople. But they have to be hunter-style sellers, because we're not going to be giving them lots of leads. We have to teach them how to go find leads. And oh, by the way, we know that the best ones tend to build strong referral networks and partnership relationships. Because eventually prospecting is very hard. You can't just keep knocking on doors and cold calling. It's a very tough job. So the good ones figure out a way to have a stream of regular leads coming in. So if you want to do that, what sort of metrics do you have to use to see if it's actually working? What would be a typical good sales metric? Okay, if you want a salesperson who sells things or a salesperson who doesn't sell things. Okay, right, yeah, so what would be a good metric of sales performance? Total sales, volume of sales, yes, absolutely. Profitability maybe. You don't want to sell stuff that doesn't make any money, right? What if you want to know if they're developing referral networks and partners? I used to sell real estate once upon a time before I went to graduate school, before I was like an HR. Number of referrals, or number of referral sources, or number of referral sources that lead to referrals that lead to closed business. Because lots of referrals is great, but if none of them actually close, that's not so helpful. Okay. So now we're on the same page. I'm going the wrong way, sorry. Okay. So, over 300 account executives, i.e. salespeople, across the U.S. were invited to participate in a study. 114% of those, by 38%, actually completed the assessments, the online questionnaires. By the way, that's a good response rate. They were offering incentives. The sales team that actually got full 100% completion in their region got like prizes like cash rewards and laptops and crazy stuff. And despite that, this is what they got. You know what I mean? It's tough to get good response rates. When they're too busy selling, they have no desire to do this because what's in it for them? The sales people, right? It is very challenging because it's a remote sales force. The managers hardly ever meet them. Even supervisor ratings are hard to collect. Can you imagine? The executive leadership support was a super big help in this regard. They were so behind it because it was so critical of moving the needle. Well, our way. We did a study. We found that 8 particular personality dimensions or behaviors were able to use in different combinations using statistics, in other words, a mathematical formula or a regression equation, to predict the key metrics that they thought were important based on what they were trying to accomplish. Profit, target achievement, meaning you're selling things that are highly profitable. Closed sales from referrals, because they wanted to get more referrals. And new sales target achievement, meaning new clients. Getting new clients, you're increasing, you've got high profitability, you're getting lots of referrals, that's probably a good salesperson, yes? Considering the job? Okay. We also found that the profile was able to correlate overall supervisory ratings with just general job performance. So, whatever, this is just showing you what it kind of looked like. We built, this is a list of different behaviors and personality dimensions that were defined as being relevant, an overall fit score, and then we also created competency models for them related to sales. They didn't have a competency plan, we created a competency model. Networking might be relevant if you're trying to build up referrals. Results and goal-oriented. Sales ability, think that might be important. Consultative sales. It's not a simple sale, you're selling credit card processing services. Planning and organizing. Being trustworthy. You think trustworthy might be important for salespeople? Imagine not being trustworthy as a salesperson. So what do we find? Average over 6 months. This is percentage of target achievement, meaning new sales. The high max score group, the group that had the high fit score, very close to hitting 100%. Pretty good for like initial program. The middle score, 60%. Low score, 25, 20-something%. What does that mean? If you have a high score on the max score, the odds are you're not going to hit sales targets. Would that be important to know? If you want to hire someone who you think is not likely to hit sales targets? Probably not. What about difference in tenure? The high and moderate max scores, the high and moderate group on the max score, the overall fit score, had double the tenure duration of the lowest group. Would that be useful to know? Yeah, they're losing people faster than they can handle. I mean, it almost would have been great for them to pay a retention bonus. Just stay. No, they're not related. The sales and the, this is a different, with the same overall fit score, we were able to create it in such a way that people who had a higher score stayed twice as long. You can't do that if you don't have good metrics. Because if you don't have good metrics, then how do you know? You see why the metrics is important here? Closed sales for referrals. 63% of the closed sales were happening from the people in the high match score group. The other ones are getting all the referrals. Everyone else is not getting so many. 32% the moderate score, 5% the low match score group. That means that of all the referral sales throughout the whole sales organization, out of 113, which is like 33% of the sales organization, the low match score group only got 5% of the referral sales. What are the odds that they're going to stick around? Something interesting, not related. Trustworthiness predicted referral sales. Isn't that neat? Well, think about it. Do you tend to refer professionals that you don't trust? Hello? Not if you want to have a good reputation, you don't, right? After the assessment process is over, how do post-launch, with actual real applicants who are not part of the study initially, Q1 versus Q2. Q2 is only April, so it's really 4 months of data here. This is